up.
Pictures up.
Pictures up. Let's roll sound. Rolling.
Rolling.
Sound speed.
Camera speed. 2. Awesome. Take 2. Mark.
And action.
Hi there, and welcome into Open Dialogue. This is Thomas Manning, and one of my favorite things about the show is we get a chance to speak with artists of all backgrounds, of all specialties, whether they're in film, music, or beyond. Today, we're talking with music producer Nicolay. He's a Grammy-nominated artist, most notably with the Foreign Exchange alongside Phonte Coleman. And in this conversation, we're talking about celebrating 20 years of the Foreign Exchange's first album, Connected, which Nicolay is taking on tour and taking his music production center, making all the beats live on stage, and just having basically a party with it, which I'm very much looking forward to attending soon. So I can't thank Nicolay enough for his time looking back over his career and his collaborations with Phonte and just his life as a creative individual and as someone who has an immense passion for making music and making art. So yeah, thank you all so much for watching and listening. Hope you enjoy the conversation with Nicolay talking about the Foreign Exchange, Connected, and a whole lot more. I kind of want to go back to the beginning, even before you got together with Phonte and the Foreign Exchange. I know during that time you had a day job and were making beats in your spare time. So when did you start, when did you first start messing around with music production? When was that, when did that ignite for you?
I think in the earliest stages, that was around the time that I was playing in funk bands in the Amsterdam area, and my initial intro to music production was to find a way to record these ideas that I had for the band to play. So it was very rudimentary, a way to kind of like lay down some ideas that ultimately were meant for other people to execute. So they weren't, certainly not productions in a way, but that's kind of how I first, I first had actually like a 6-track recorder, like a tape, multi-track recorder that the band had actually won in like a contest or something. So that was literally, I took it home one day and I started sort of exploring what it is to do multi-track recording, like how to do drums and then bass and whatever. So my first foray in music production was making these little demos that I would then give to the band as ideas to play, you know what I mean? But I would already sort of do a lot of effects and stuff. Like, truth of the matter is, a lot of these were not things that the band could necessarily execute because I was already just using a lot of tricks and stuff, you know what I mean? I was really into like putting effects on vocals, speeding stuff up, like pitching stuff up. So at some point it was more almost like a thing that I just did just to have fun. And these things were kind of really influenced by stuff that we would listen to at the time, like Bootsy records or George Clinton records. So we were heavily into P-Funk at the time. So particularly, voices and stuff were always fun to kind of pitch them up and down and just put all sorts of kind of crazy effects on them. So that would have been the mid 90s. So very much not in any kind of serious way.
And then I guess it was the early 2000s when you met Phonte on OK Player. And let's see, was that pretty common for you to reach out to people on there and ask them if they wanted to collaborate? Was that something that you did frequently?
Actually, it was the other way around. I did not. The only reason that so as you said, at the early 2000s, I kind of like decided that the band thing, that just was not going to be a way that I could make a living. So I had done the responsible thing and gotten a job, and I was working at a call center. And so the monotony of that life sort of drove me to kind of go back to recording stuff at the, during the night hours. And so I started making these beats really kind of just as an outlet, like not really having a plan with them. I wasn't part of a scene or anything like that. And then concurrently or parallel to that, I had established myself as a member on OK Player. primarily just because that was a website that aggregated a lot of artists that I was a fan of, like D'Angelo and The Roots and Common. So my first foray on OK Players certainly was not at all to further myself, but to just kind of become a part of a community that was appreciating other artists. But I quickly found out that there was a lot of people, that it was kind of a breeding spot almost for really talented people that were all at the same time kind of at the beginning of this sort of journey. And I don't think we realized it as such. But we were all in there. Phonte was one of those people. Also drawn, by like essentially just the artists that were on there. And so I put my music on there one day, not really in even to reach out for collaborations, but more to get some feedback from people that I thought would know what they were talking about. Like I had a couple of really good friends back home who liked hip hop, but they were fans of what I was doing, and I didn't know if that was kind of indicative of quality or loyalty. So I really decided one day that this would be a great place to sort of get the real raw on what I was doing, and that based on the feedback I could either go back to the drawing board or something else. And ironically, the first two beats that I put on there were really well received. And so it was actually Phonte who reached out to me to see what I was doing with them. And as I told you, I had no plans. I had no thought out sort of strategy for him. And so he was like, well, what if because at that point he was sort of at the beginning stages of Little Brother. He was like, what if Little Brother records something to this tracks? And I had become a fan. This all kind of parallel. I had become a fan of what they were doing in their earliest days. So that seemed like a really great thing to me. So I immediately said yes. And that was in February of 02, actually. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
The
so
only reason I remember that is because I still have the DM. Like it was literally, yeah. And in the Little Brother documentary, it actually, there's a screenshot of it. Just for posterity's sake,
yeah, absolutely. You got to preserve that. Oh, I love
Yes.
it. Yeah. And so you made Connected, but there was basically an ocean between y'all the whole time. I don't think you met Fonte until after y'all had completed the album. And I think you've talked about before how that kind of allowed you both to be your most honest, authentic, creative selves. Can you expand on that a little bit and how having that distance really just cultivated that creativity between y'all?
Yeah, that's a great point. Like I think at first, obviously, it was just the only way that we were practically able to even do that. At the time, we didn't really realize that it was sort of a novel way of making records. I was in Amsterdam and he was in North Carolina, and I just, this was in the early days of higher speed internet connection. So we were able to send each other MP3s. That was kind of about the extent of which we could go. Like Phonte didn't even have his own computer in those early days. So he would have to go to like a computer lab at the university and stuff. And, there was a 6-hour time difference too. But yeah, like I think now 20 years later we realize that that was actually kind of the nucleus of a way of working that we now realize allows us sort of like each of us to be completely uninhibited in our expression. I'm the type of person that I don't really like people looking over my shoulder when I create. I instantly become very self-conscious and I start to censor myself and I start to sort of imagine what would be good in their eyes. And so a lot of the more adventurous stuff that we went on to do over the years, I don't think we would have done if we would have been in the same room together and looking at each other like, that would, and the same goes for Phonte. Like he's not really somebody who likes to record with 20 people hanging out. And, he, and especially once we made the transition to more personal material, more reflective stuff where he would do a lot of singing. Like it really was a thing where, and we call this I don't need you to see you kill the cow, just show me the burger. that's kind of what our motto is. Like I'm sure that he wouldn't be interested in me going through like a million hi-hats before I land on the one, and so the same goes for him. So yeah, when I present an idea to him, it's a fully formed, it's an idea that I have taken as far as I could take in order to present the idea in a way that I think it has the best chance. And he does the same with the vocals. And so initially that was just a byproduct of the fact that there was an ocean between us. But even now, we kind of, at this point, we don't want to jinx that. It's kind of become like a thing. So we still work like that to this day. Like we haven't ever recorded in the same studio together.
So, what are some specific elements of Phonte as an artist and as a creative individual that really stood out to you in those early days and really clicked with you, and where you were like, okay, this is a guy that I definitely know I'm going to work with well, and that I can see a partnership forming there?
I think it was a couple of things. Like one, I really liked his eclectic music taste. Like he was very knowledgeable in hip hop and R&B, but he was also, for instance, a really big Radiohead fan, and I thought that was interesting, And he in general has a very wide eclectic taste, and the same goes for me. So that was something that we connected on early on. And then another thing was that he tended to sing his own hooks, and like I thought that was really sort of I was obviously a big fan of him as an MC, and I still believe that I think he is the greatest MC in his generation for sure. But he would sing his own hooks, and they had a D'Angelo like quality to them. I was a really really big fan of the Voodoo album that came out in I think it was early 2000 or something, and that really kind of informed my taste and my view on vocals and vocal arrangements. And there was a D'Angelo like quality to Phonte singing that I really enjoyed. So I mean, it would be easy for me to say that I knew all these things, like that I knew that we would one day be a legendary duo and that it was all predestined, and I knew from the start. And sometimes, depending on the day, I will definitely claim that. But the truth is that, I think the thing that bound us together was a trust, immediately, in the sense that I think we recognized that we were both very music minded, that we didn't really have too much interest in what would be behind sort of what would be the after effects of making music, like a financial gain or fame or otherwise. I think we're both still to this day 100% music driven. So in some weird sort of predestined way, that trust was there from the beginning, because a lot of people will say, so you just send music overseas to somebody and you send your intellectual property and this and that, and he just sent his vocals. And yeah, like maybe that is a big deal when you think about all that could go wrong. But it never did, so for us it always just felt a very natural and uncomplicated process.
Is there a certain track on Connected that you feel it kind of encapsulates everything you love about it? I'm sure that it would be like asking you to pick a favorite child, but is there one
Right.
is there one out there that kind of just is on another level for you?
Nick's Groove is the one, for a number of reasons. Like that was among the first two tracks that Phonte sent me back. It was one of our earliest collaborations, and as such, it represents for me kind of the kernel, of what all was to come. I particularly really was proud of that track when I did it, because it was one of the first times that I really felt that I had mastered a certain quality of beat making, in the sense that the samples that I used, what I did with them, how I treated them, then the bass line that I added, the drums, like it was one of the early works that I was really proud of. after kind of 2 years of chasing sort of, a sound that I didn't really quite know how to achieve. So that was one of the first moments where I was like, oh wow, I'm onto something. And then the vocals kind of illustrating what I said before. I thought the raps were incredible, and then the hook, that was a singing hook, was just kind of the icing on the cake. And so when I first heard that track, like I often say that I wish I could go back to that moment, that euphoria, and that like realizing that you're hearing something that is exactly how you would like the music that you want to make, but realizing that it's your own music, and that you have sort of struck gold, if you will. So that track for me really kind of represents those earliest years.
And you moved to North Carolina, I believe, in 2006. Was that tough for you to do? What made you realize that you wanted to pick up and move across the world? Was that an easier decision, or just how were you feeling about that?
I mean, it's very it's kind of a double edged sword. Like, it was a very tough decision because all my family is there, my brother, my sister, my parents. But Connected was so successful in the US that it quickly became uh important for me to be here a lot, and to sort of see what other opportunities would present themselves, like, doing shows or whatever, or production for others. So initially I just came to the States a bunch of times, and it was actually BBE, the label that released Connected and that signed me to a solo deal earlier in my career. They suggested that I would they basically proposed to sponsor me for a visa, if I had any interest in doing that. And so it was, on the one hand, a very easy decision to make, of like, okay, everything is bubbling, everything is popping, I need to be there. I've always been, a sort of like a U.S. minded individual. I think in general in the Netherlands, you kind of grow up with a lot of American movies, television, certainly music. So from that perspective, it was kind of a natural and logical choice to make, but it was it required sacrificing other things on a personal level that every now and then I'm still sort of dealing with, in terms of just the fact that you miss a lot of family life, a lot of birthdays, a lot of holidays, and that over time becomes, as you kind of see your family age, becomes more difficult actually versus less difficult. But it was the right decision for me to make, because it really allowed me to really start my career, and then it allowed the foreign exchange to become a bona fide live act, for instance. And so, I mean, it kind of put everything in a much it really just sort of streamlined what we were able to do. And so that's when the foreign exchange, from a side project, kind of became the main project for us for quite a while.
And you mentioned performing live, and I believe early on that was something that you weren't very used to. You were just used to, making your beats at home, and then all of a sudden you're out there on stage and just in a new environment. Do you remember the first venue in the U.S. that you played? Do you remember what that experience was?
So with like, I did some DJ shows on my own, but basically with the foreign exchange, we so this is fast forward a couple of years, we drop Leave It All Behind, our second album, and that was received so well that there were show offers coming in. And so the first show that we did for that was in November of '08 at the Highline Ballroom in New York, and we were all wildly nervous. There's a recording of that show, and you can literally hear it. It's not a very good show. It's a historic show for sure. but you can hear like it that like none like Phonte obviously at that point had a lot of experience as one of the MCs and Little Brother, but he had no experience as like a singing frontman. He really didn't know how to approach that, or even, we didn't even really know what one would wear. So we wore these suits and these kind of really, extravagant sort of elaborate outfits, and it took us I think it took us a few months, but I think by early '09, we started seeing like, okay, like these songs on Leave It All Behind are actually really perfect to play with a live band, and lend themselves really well to like a live translation. And so then we kind of started really taking it in stride, and it became, a real thing. So we had a big live band with not outside of Phonte and myself, with Yazara and Darian Brockington from the albums, and really kind of came out there with almost like a vocal group kind of approach. And so I think we grew into that really quickly, and actually got, I think as a live band, got really good at it. But those first couple of shows were touch and go for sure. Yeah.
And right now you're doing some stuff on the road with celebrating 20 years of Connected, and tomorrow I'll be seeing you at the Neighborhood Theater in Charlotte. Is it just you and your MPC? Is that how this tour is going?
Yeah, it is literally me taking you back to 20 years ago. Like literally, I'm bringing my equipment, and I literally go back 20 years in time, where it's just me at a desk, and I'm creating sort of these tracks that would become connected. So what I have essentially all of our multi-tracks. Like I dove into all of our multi-tracks, which for the people that don't know what it is kind of the separate elements that make up a song, like drums and bass and samples. And so I'm recreating a lot of it on the spot. I play a lot of the original samples that I used and came across, and I kind of juxtapose it with newer material out of our catalog. And then as I kind of go, once I'm sort of, 20 years ago, I kind of go further and further back to today. And then pretty much the last hour of the show is more centered on really new material. But yeah, it's literally me on my own. Like it's the first time I've ever done that. So it's a very exhilarating and also slightly nerve-wracking experience. I did the first show at the end of September, and it was incredible. But I stepped on that stage, and that was when I really realized like it's all gonna have to come from me now, and that was a very new experience. But I felt like the time had come to do that, to be completely out there on my own, and yeah, kind of take people back into time and show them sort of a little bit of a look behind the curtain of what I was doing like in 2002 to like 2004.
Yeah, and you've also got your new album Terra Firma, which just came out a few months ago, and I think that was your first full-length solo production in what, 18 years or so.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess you'll be playing a few tracks from that as well.
Yeah. I'm really happy with that, because yeah, as you say, it was the first time that like because I was a member of the Foreign Exchange, and that was my main focus. Like my solo projects tended to be more experimental or even instrumental, and so I felt that the time was right to again kind of bring those 20 years full circle, and kind of make up the balance of 20 years of music making, take stock of all the things that I've done. So there's a little bit of hip hop on there that kind of really sort of hints at those early days. There's a lot of R&B on it that is more kind of Leave It All Behind style, and there's even a number of like there's drum and bass, there's house on it. So more kind of influences from growing up in Europe, that I kind of wanted to sort of let seep into my sound. There's a Stevie Wonder tribute on there, so it's really kind of a I think an audio resume, if you will, of who I am, what I like, what I've done. And so yeah, that like essentially the show takes you from the earliest moments in my career to literally the most recent ones, which is terra firma. And that feels really amazing because 20 years have kind of flown by in a crazy way. People always told me that, like, older people would always tell you that time flies by, and you're like, that's probably not true, but that's really, really like the case. So like those 20 years went by like in a snap. So it's really cool to hopscotch like through all those years and just kind of take little bits, and for me it's kind of a journey down memory lane just as much, and but it's also very much like a fan service. Like, it's very much also kind of a love letter to the fans, because I really I've always really appreciated how people feel about our earliest work. It's very beloved, and in many ways people just show a lot of passion for it. So it's also me kind of saying thank you to people that have supported us for that long.
And since you've been in North Carolina, the hip hop scene here has really grown over the years. Obviously you got J. Coleman, Dreamville, you got Rhapsody as well. So I'm just curious for you as someone who's kind of been in the thick of it. What are some things? What has that meant to you to see North Carolina continue to grow as as just an important geographical area for hip hop?
Well, and I would go even further to say that like it's kind of true for music as a whole, because there's a lot of, even outside of hip hop, there's a lot of really, really great North Carolina music, like Sylvan Esso is a group that I really like, that have been really successful. So it's been really fun because like North Carolina is now clearly my home. I was received here very warmly. I always joke that I'm North Carolina's adopted son. And so it's been really like North Carolina for me, those earliest years when I was still in Amsterdam, was almost like a mythological place that I heard Phonte talk about on records. And they would always shout out NC, and so I guess in my mind it had become sort of like this sort of place that I would always imagine what it was like. So coming here was a really, really cool experience to sort of see like the place behind all these lyrics, the place behind all these people, where all these people grew up, you know what I mean, where Phonte grew up. So it's definitely become my home. And as such, like I feel a certain pride. I feel a certain skin in the game at this point, you know what I mean? And I always say that North Carolina kind of has the best of both worlds, of the North and the South, if you will. Both in terms of sensibilities of people, but certainly in terms of the sound. That definitely goes for hip hop. And I'm just really excited to see all these artists kind of reach a national acclaim. Certainly J. Cole, who's become an absolute superstar. Like, that's really just cool to see, because that I think put North Carolina on the map in a way that it hadn't really been before. Maybe save Petey Pablo or somebody like that. But so it's a very vibrant scene. A lot of talented people, again, across the genres. I really like His Golden Messenger. That is a band from Raleigh. So there's a ton of incredible, talented people here. And I was really reminded by that when in the wake of Hurricane Helene, we were involved with a compilation, Cardinals in the Window. And it was really sort of a reminder that even for me personally, of like what an amazing place I've ended up in. So yeah, North Carolina is definitely has definitely become, I guess, as important to me as to the people who have their origins here.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Cardinals at the Window. I definitely had to download that album and was just blown away at how many artists came together for that. I thought that was a really beautiful thing. Um, and
It had like 100 million tracks on it.
yeah,
Like,
it was incredible. You could listen, I think it was like 10 hours of music. It was awesome.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
very, and a beautiful thing to see people sort of coming together to help. It was like, the irony is, like, I live in Wilmington, North Carolina. I live in where normally the hurricanes hit. So like I went through Florence in 2018, and so it was really a weird experience to realize that the west of the state was dealing with it, and got dealt such a heavy blow. But it was really beautiful to see so many different artists come together, and it I think it did really well. I think it raised like some serious money for people. So that was awesome to see.
Absolutely, for sure. Yeah. And earlier you mentioned the Little Brother documentary, May the Lord Watch. And we got to see the message, the original message board on there. And you were interviewed for that doc as well. It's been making some noise at some film festivals. It was featured in Rolling Stone. So I'm sure for you, that's been pretty cool to see, Phonte and Pooh get their flowers and have their story captured in that way. I'm just curious to have you speak a bit more to what that journey looks like from your standpoint and what that means to you.
Yeah, that was really I first and foremost, I really loved the my little segment in that film, because I was interviewed for the film, but I wasn't quite sure how that was going to play, because it was clearly, it was a little brother documentary, not a foreign exchange documentary. But once I saw the film and how it was placed, kind of, and how it was done, it made perfect sense. I was actually very, very honored. And the main takeaway for me was, like, I've always experienced the little brother story through Phonte's eyes. Like, my relationship is with Phonte. I know Pooh fairly well, but we are not close, per se. And I've only met Ninth Wonder, like, I think one or two times, but obviously me and Phonte have a brotherhood. So I've always sort of heard the story told by him. But it was really, really cool to sort of see the full picture of it, and to see it explained from the beginning, the early successes, and then some of the trials and tribulations that led to the breakup and eventually reforming. A lot of those details, like, same as many fans, I didn't really know. Like, I would hear Phonte talk about it from his perspective, but it was really amazing to see how well, like, I was just very proud of how well it was done. I particularly loved the animation layer, because that made it so endearing. Like, even when it was like, when the content got a little darker, that layer kind of kept it sort of like emotionally very endearing, and kind of kept it all together. So I thought that was a masterstroke, and I was just really, really impressed with it. I think it was a very, outside of the fact that those are my brothers and I love them, I think as a whole it was an incredible music documentary, and I'm a big fan of music docs. So just on that element alone, I thought it was really, really good. But I really watched it kind of as a fan, even though I'm in it. I really got to watch it as a fan, and seeing the ups and downs, and knowing a little bit myself about that the life of a musician is something that is can have its real sort of dark moments. I thought it was an incredible watch. I watched it during a premiere in Durham with Phonte and his mom and just a lot of family. So it was really, none of us had seen. I hadn't even seen a snippet of it. You know what I mean? So it was a very it was an emotional experience, and I thought a really nice crown on 20 years of music. And I was honored that I played a little small part in it. And I thought, again, it was really, really, really well done.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I'm a big fan of the documentary and a big movie guy in general, as you can see from all the stuff around me here. And
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and I know you mentioned earlier that you kind of grew up with American movies. Are there any filmmaking artists that come to mind that have served as an inspiration for you or an influence on finding your creativity?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've always been a really big movie fan. I think my earliest, like, I was a really, really, like, when I was growing up, I was a huge Eddie Murphy fan. So I was really big on that string of movies like Coming to America, Golden Child, Beverly Hills Cop. Like, those were to me kind of quintessentially American movies that I really, really, really enjoyed. But I really liked, you know, a, a lot of these movies that came out, I think, sort of mid '80s to late '80s. Like as a kid, Spielberg movies were really big to me. Like I remember watching E.T. and just being blown away. I loved the early Ghostbusters. So Harold Ramis and stuff like that. So I was really um and I really like the films. Like I really like Pretty in Pink and that whole sort of second generation Rat Pack, Saint Elm Street, Elm's Fire, what is it, Elmo's Fire, like all of those movies. So yeah, I grew up on American cinema, and not necessarily even sort of highbrow stuff, but just really kind of the blockbuster things, and that was a big deal. We would go see them in theater, and same for television. Like I would always watch things like Knight Rider and A Team and stuff like that, so and the same went for music. So in a lot of ways, like culturally, I grew up on a lot of that and a lot of that stuff, and movies have been just always kind of a really big part. I'm a big movie composer fan. Like I'm really a big fan of soundtracks from kind of the earliest, like Bernard Herrmann, like original Cape Fear, like Hitchcock, that sound to really kind of present day to like people like Hans Zimmer. So I'm really particularly into soundtracks. Obviously, legendary John Williams, all the Star Wars stuff. So I think to whatever degree, I'm sure that has shaped my sound to whatever degree.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, well, Nick, it's been awesome talking with you today. I appreciate you making the time and really looking forward to tomorrow and looking forward to seeing you there. It sounds like it'll be a good time.
Yeah, man. Looking forward to shaking your head, dude. Thank you so much. And yeah, I'll see you tomorrow, man. And you have a
For
great
sure.
night.
All right, thanks a lot. I'll
All
see
right.
you.
All right, guys, pictures up.
Pictures up.
Pictures up. Let's roll sound. Rolling.
Rolling.
Sound speed.
Camera speed. Awesome. Take two.
And action.